All right, guys, welcome right back on Africa Business Radio. Winston and Rachel are still with you on a beautiful Monday morning. It's time to have that conversation. We did tell you about, our discussion around cybersecurity, especially for small businesses, and just pretty much how to, protect yourself so you don't get into a serious situation.
That's right.
Yes, and we definitely will have some interesting guests join us right now to talk about this. A professional, so you can really, really understand this. And like I told you, get ready to take notes.
Yes, and it's very, very important area of concern for every small business owner, because when you consider all the important data that you store virtually, from your financial records to customers' private information, it's not hard to see why one breach could seriously damage your business. So pay attention to this one. We have an interesting guest already joining us right now.
Absolutely. All right, guys, so joining us right now on Breakfast Connect on Africa Business Radio to talk about cybersecurity for SMEs. We have Gerhard Conradie, who is the co-founder and global head of solutions architecture ENHALO Group. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you guys?
I'm all right. I hope you got your name right.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Fantastic. Good to have you on the show. Want to talk about something that really concerns, pretty much everybody. And just like myself and Rachel had said before you joined us, we said even individuals who have, huge social media platforms that have turned into, business platforms really need to pay attention to this, because people have their social media accounts get hacked and they lose so many following, and then they can't even get business deals anymore. So hearing from you as a professional, how would you define cybersecurity?
Well, to get the boring stuff out of the way, cybersecurity refers to a body of technologies, processes, and practices. They're designed to protect your workstations, your servers, programs, and data, and obviously protect those from damage or unauthorized access. And that's really, in a nutshell, what cybersecurity is.
Fantastic. I think that anybody who doesn't even have an idea about tech would understand that clearly. All right, so cybersecurity. You want to tell us why cybersecurity is super important? And because a lot of people don't think it's necessary. Some people think, why should I even change my password? Some people have like the same password for literally all of their accounts at work, down to personal emails and everything else. So why is cybersecurity very important, especially for businesses?
Well, I mean, there are main elements of cybersecurity. There's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And from a confidentiality perspective, that involves limiting the access and preventing unauthorized access. For us as consumers and customers, and e-commerce is a good example of that. We give e-commerce sites our personal information, and we expect them to protect that information, credit card details, addresses, the likes of that. So that's from a confidentiality perspective. And then from an integrity perspective, you expect data to remain untampered and unmodified, and so that it can be trusted, and that it has integrity along with the data. And a good example of that would be banks. We trust that our bank statements and the digital information that they present to us is accurate. So we need to trust that integrity of that data. And then you wouldn't think that availability, it sounds more like disaster and recovery and stuff like that. I deleted a file, I need to restore it. But from a cybersecurity perspective, availability is important from a denial of service attack. So that's when someone maliciously makes a website become unavailable, or something that most people have experienced to some degree as ransomware attacks. You don't think of that as an availability attack, but it brings down systems, disrupts the access, and as consumers and businesses, our customers then struggle with access to our systems and the availability. And that's the way that cybersecurity covers those three areas.
Right. And as you've mentioned, I mean, this is something that hits the headlines almost every single day. Barely a day goes by without a confidential data breach, being heard of. It's been a huge problem for data security, and it causes a lot of damage for organizations, regardless of the size of that particular industry. And it can be very, very serious. So what can you tell us about protective measures needed to address all areas to ensure that the most common data leakage threats are prevented?
Well, I mean, there's plenty of different tools and technologies that are in place to do that. There's, for instance, intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. So detection is a very common, obviously understood. It's the process of monitoring and detecting indicators of an attack, and then being able to trigger the notifications and the remedial action. On the other hand, the prevention side is where you actually then block those, look for specific types of data that's attempting to enter into the network, and then block that specific data once you see that type of traffic enter into the environment. From a company data leakage perspective, we always tend to think that a data leakage happens from disgruntled employees. We have a disgruntled employee and they're going to be leaking data out the environment. But the reality is that 4 out of 5 data breaches result from human error, not disgruntled employees. So that's commonly referred to as the insider threat. So the biggest cybersecurity threat to businesses are these massive breaches from accidental human error events. It's also predicted that these insider threats are going to increase by 8% in 2021. So the new normal, us working remotely and trying to use our tools the same way we did in the office, has expanded on that specific problem, because you suddenly have a workforce that are no longer behind firewalls in the office. They 90 to 100% working remotely, and you try to have as much workforce out of the safety net of the office. So that growth is worrying, and from a recent insight study into businesses and their feeling of risk around this, 68% of organizations felt either moderately or extremely vulnerable to data leakage, which is obviously massive. There are fortunately fixes for that. 2 easy fixes is security awareness, training and testing, and that is where we train staff to look for specific events and specific telltale signs of them being tricked into doing data leakage events. They would click on a link, open up a file, go to a specific website, certain behavior around that. And then obviously the other side of it is just irregular behavior detection. When they do something that is harmful, to block that and to teach good behavior.
Right. Before I go into the next question, just to further clarify what you just said, which is really detailed, does it help if, an organization or business has, a strong IT firm a department rather, that handles everything that has to do with tech, even, down to emails and correspondences, files, data transfer? Does that help? Because I know in some businesses, not regular stuff are allowed to do that. So you say, we're expecting this file from this person, you can send it to me and I just download it straight to my system. However, does it help if you have the IT department totally handle that when it comes to receiving files and data transfer and all that stuff? Does that help?
I mean, to a degree, because maybe they're more afraid with what to look out for. There is a certain amount of human savvy as well, and what's called the human firewall. So you can't get away from training staff to think for themselves and not to depend on the technology in totality. So an IT department can help to a certain degree, but the most important filter within the protecting against data breaches is the human firewall. more, educate accordingly, reinforce and help staff be able to identify these, because inevitably the IT department isn't always there to catch, and the technologies aren't there to catch every single one of these. So it definitely does help, but you can't rely on them solely. They can only protect you so much. And then also in terms of your question around inside IT departments, absolutely, but they also get overworked, understaffed, undertooled. What we regularly find is the IT department is expected to do all these things without being given the tools or the budget to do so. Most businesses also, they're not IT shops, so they do not have the budget or the knowledge or the tools to cost effectively implement what is necessary, which is why using outsourced partners then becomes critical. Let the staff focus on high value activities, let them focus on helping the business grow, as opposed to firefighting or spreading themselves so thin that all that they're doing is firefighting at all times.
Right, fantastic. So let's talk about brute force attack. What is that, and how do you prevent brute force attack?
Well, brute force attacks are very basically attacks that run big dictionaries of words against an account, a username, and then it'll try lots of different passwords and variations on passwords to break into that account. The only reason why brute forces work is when the accounts are set up in such a way that they don't lock out at all. And that's you'd think that would be the abnormal, but it is very, very normal. Let's start with the basic Windows computer as it gets installed. It always is installed with the very first user that is created as an administrator. That administrator is set to never lock out. So the account itself, no matter how many times that you sign into that account, will never lock out the account and block further attempts to brute force it, in essence. So there's lots of other technologies that has similar problems, but Windows, there's such a huge base and most people use those, that it's a very broad base to be able to attack. So the way that you mitigate that is to manage that specific account, and what we provide, for instance, to customers are services where we would firstly disable that account, randomize the password, so there's no more risk around that account, create a randomized user, randomized password for that, and then store that securely. And then the third step that you take is you set a policy which allows accounts to be locked out, which weirdly sometimes doesn't get done. So you should allow for maybe someone to attempt 5 times their password, then the account gets locked out, and then you can start investigating as to why this is happening. But disabling accounts that can never lock out, setting their passwords to very complex passwords, and then creating a secondary administrator next to that has a random username and password mitigates against any brute force attack. That account will just inevitably lock out when that happens. And that's pretty much in a nutshell what brute forces do and how you can mitigate against those.
Speaking of passwords now, I mean, earlier on in the show, Ian Winston had talked about how it's very convenient to have one password across all your platforms. And the thing is, passwords will always remain the main method to authenticate users to platforms and systems. You can't do away with passwords. So the big question would be, how can users make that authentication process to be more secure?
Well, it's actually interesting that you mentioned you always have to have passwords, and you are absolutely right. There are challenges in terms of a password that you use on your Office system will regularly be a similar password that you would use on other external systems, LinkedIn, a myriad of other external websites that you might go to. So the risk is there that if the password gets hacked or there's a breach at the external website, they know a list of passwords. That list of passwords gets sold on the dark web, and someone is going to be attempting to now break into the Office. And if you use the same password across all of those, yes, they are going to get in. And now they're going to have secure access into your environment because of the similarity in the passwords. So yes, using the same password is not ideal, but what do you do about that? And there is actually the way that you would secure access to a certain level, and we've all experienced it, is to use multi-factor authentication. And we all know it as an SMS gets sent to your phone, a prompt appears from the app, let's say the banking app on your phone, to authorize your login onto the website. Those are all good ways to secure access and to obviously mitigate the risks of having to type in a password and then have nothing after that to stop you from gaining access into the system. The problem with that is, though, that they all have one major flaw, in that if I forgot my password, I just say I forgot my password and I reset it. If I want to add a device and I forgot my password, I'd reset, get the link, change my password from the email they send me, add my new phone, and I'm ready. And you can probably see where the problem comes in, is that if someone already has access to your email box, either by reading the email with the tool that they have on there, or they already have access to your mailbox because of this leaked password on the dark web, all that they need is to reset, bring that email in, connect up another phone, and authorize making some transactions, or in other words, circumvent the multi-factor. And that gets us to passwordless authentication. There are technologies available that are zero trust passwordless authentication services. They totally eliminate password-based attacks such as this. So they do exist, and there are services available that can help with that, so that you never ever have to put in a password to authenticate. The system will seamlessly allow you to authenticate, and it's then possible to avoid these types of attacks, which even multi-factor will not protect you against, or standard, let's call it multi-factor, will not protect you against this.
So I was going through a cybersecurity tip some time ago, and I saw something about not sending sensitive documents or sensitive information via mail. You know how you have documents and you save them up in your mail, your email address, your email, just so you can get back to them whenever, because it's always there. And then I was quite shocked when I saw it, because, I mean, where are you supposed to save all these sensitive documents if your email isn't safe? So how can you protect your email messages now?
On the technical side, you should always, with every one of your email providers, there's a very basic outbound, when you send the email protection mechanism called TLS, and it's the boring technical stuff. But what it pretty much says is, when I send an email, make sure you encrypt it so that it gets to the other side encrypted, so that no one can read it. And that's a very standard thing. So it's between when you send an email to Gmail or wherever you send it to, that at least when it's traveling across the internet, that it's encrypted there. That's in transit, as it's called. But there are tools that will allow you to encrypt emails as they arrive in your mailbox, either automatically based on keywords, and that ensures that only yourself and the administrators that have access to that specific encryption tool can then read the email. And if an administrator reads the email, you get a notification email sent to you to say they decrypted the email and they've now read it. So there are ways to secure email, either that arrive. Let's say someone sends a sensitive piece of content to you, either a credit card number or a sensitive document or something like that. An easy way to right-click encrypt and encrypt it inside the mailbox. Another way is as to when you then send email, to have the ability to have a secure and send button, and there's technologies available that will allow you to do that. So you simply hit the secure and send button, and it will then encrypt it, put it in your send items as encrypted, so even your administrator cannot read your email, or a current hacker that might be attempting to get into it, because it's got another layer of security. Right. And then as it sends it to the recipient, they receive it encrypted as well. But there are, in other words, ways of encrypting email inside your mailbox that you receive, and email that you're busy sending out as well.
Right, fantastic. You've actually shed so much light on a lot of things that bother so many of us and also affect so many businesses. Now, we also do know that ENHALO focuses on 3 business pillars, which is reducing risk through its cybersecurity offerings, reducing costs through digital transformation, and also increasing revenue through automation. These are absolutely interesting USPs. So you want to tell us about some other, unique things that stand out for your company, what you guys do, and also how easy is it to work with you people? Because the thing is, for a lot of companies like yours, right, a lot of people say, it's always so much stress, or it's too expensive to have your services, or communication is always a problem. So most times when there's a cyber threat or something, it's hard to get in touch with the company that provides the services for you. So by the time they respond, say because they have too many clients, your company is already almost done or gone. So what are some of the other unique selling points that ENHALO has? You want to just run us through quickly, and how easy is it to get in touch with you? Say you want to give out social media handles or any other thing so people can get in touch with you. Yes, all right.
Certainly. So in terms of, like you rightly say, cybersecurity can seem to be daunting and complex, and there's a trait of trying to sell customers products that really is just a massive mess of different products with massive overlap. So ENHALO, by definition of the word, encircles in light. We look at the different technologies that the customer has in place already, utilize those which they have, avoid overlap, which immediately saves money. So on that problem of it costs a lot of money and it's a bottomless pit, we ensure that the overlap is zero or as minimal as possible, so the customers don't keep on buying products and just get to buy products based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Right. So that's a huge technique used. And I mean, in terms of the principles, we work with customers, look at key critical areas, identify where their biggest threats are to their unique situation, and develop security practices around that. Especially for SMEs, they don't have the budgets of the very, very large environments with thousands and thousands of seats. So they need to have custom-made services that fit to the SME market. And I mean, SME is broad in South Africa, and in African terms, maybe 100, 250, or 50 to 500, and overseas it's up to 1,500. So it depends on what you define as SME, but we've got tools available that cover all of those areas.
Fantastic.
So yeah, in terms of being able to get in touch with us, and like you say, the issue is that the providers get too busy. We recently had a very similar situation with a customer that had an incumbent that couldn't respond. It was 2-3 days later. You probably know of the Hafnium, that deer cry, the recent attack that occurred, and 2-3 days later, still no response to the specific threat. And we were on the call doing the incident bridge, responding to the incident, and being able to lock down the environment and protect the customer from massive damage. And that was across hundreds of servers, but it can be done for any size customer. And we were able to identify the main areas of concern and help them through it. And within a weekend, we were done. We spent the rest of the week just making sure of the following week, just making sure that we had achieved and systematically ticking off areas. But yeah, very, very quick response. We've got the capacity to do it because we have both South African offices in the Philippines, UK, and the US. Great. And we were able to, across all the time zones, pull in all of the different teams to be able to respond, which I think is a huge USP for ourselves, and the customers saw the value in there. And yeah, if customers want to reach out to us, they can email sales@enhalo.co. It's just sales, SALES, at ENHALO, ENHALO.co. And then we'll gladly reach out to them and assist them. And if they have an incident response or a cyber incident response that they need us involved with, we can definitely assist them and get them up and running, or protected as quickly as possible.
Fantastic stuff. Fantastic.
Real great. We've been talking cybersecurity for businesses with the co-founder and global head of solutions architecture in ENHALO Group, Gerhard Conradie. Thank you so much for doing this with us this morning. I do hope you'll be available for further conversations.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Yes, you too. All right, guys. It's been absolutely amazing hanging with you on Breakfast Connect. We'll come right back after that interesting conversation. I hope you got so many tips of that. He literally spelled out so many things. And what I loved about the interview was how he simplified a lot of things. So for somebody like me that gets all, what is going on with these tech guys, but then especially when it comes to things that affect me or affect my business or affect my brand or affect my platforms, he just made it so simple and so easy to understand. And now you can walk into your IT guy's office and say, I know what this means. It's fine. I got this.
So don't forget the address he gave you. You can catch them on LinkedIn. I'm looking at their page right now, and they're doing amazing stuff. Stay here.
Stay here.